Some fathers lose their wives. Justin Walsh lost his wife, and then spent 18 months trying to erase her from existence. After Rebecca died of cancer, he didn't grieve. He controlled. He turned their Boston home into a tomb of silence, where his 6-year-old twins, Owen and Spencer, learned that loving their mother out loud made Daddy angry, where laughter was forbidden, where her name was never spoken, where every trace of her warmth was scrubbed away until nothing remained but cold, white walls and rules that said, "Don't feel, don't remember, don't cry." But on one ordinary Thursday afternoon, Justin came home early and walked into a scene that would shatter the prison he'd built around his broken heart. His maid, Brenda Jackson, had done the unthinkable. She'd given his sons markers, and they'd covered his perfect walls with drawings of the one person he'd forbidden them to remember their mother. What happened next wasn't just anger, it was 18 months of buried grief exploding all at once. And in that moment, Justin had to choose: destroy the last piece of his wife's memory, or finally let himself feel the pain he'd been running from since the day she died. But before we begin, click subscribe, like this video, and tell us where in the world you're watching from. I hope this story makes you believe that healing begins the moment we stop hiding our hearts. The flight got cancelled. Weather delay. Justin Walsh didn't call home, he never did. He liked the element of surprise. Liked knowing he could walk through his front door any moment and find everything exactly as he'd left it. Clean, quiet, controlled. So when his car pulled up to the house at 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday, he expected the usual, the silence, the order, the pristine emptiness that had become his only comfort since Rebecca died. He pushed open the front door and heard laughter. Real laughter, the kind that echoes, the kind that sounds like joy. Justin froze. His heart lurched not with happiness, but with something closer to panic, because laughter didn't belong here anymore. Not in this house, not since the funeral. He moved toward the sound, his chest tightening with every step. The living room door was open, and through it he saw color. Blues, pinks, greens, reds, all over his walls. His perfect $8,000 gallery white walls. Justin stepped into the doorway and stopped breathing. Owen and Spencer were on their knees, markers in hand, drawing with a kind of wild, desperate focus he hadn't seen in them since the day they buried their mother. Their little hands moved fast, like they were afraid someone would stop them. Their faces were smudged with paint, their eyes were bright. And written across the wall in wobbly letters that broke his heart and shattered his control all at once: Mummy. Behind them, standing with her hand on Owen's shoulder, was Brenda Jackson, the maid he'd hired 6 months ago, the woman who was supposed to follow his rules. She wasn't following them now. She looked up. Their eyes met. She didn't apologize, didn't flinch, didn't try to explain. She just stood there calm, steady, defiant, and waited. And in that moment, something inside Justin cracked wide open. "What the hell is this?" His voice came out like a whip, sharp, brutal, louder than he meant it to be. The laughter died instantly. Spencer dropped his marker, his face crumpled. Owen went completely still, his body freezing in that awful, empty way that meant he was shutting down. Brenda didn't move. She stayed right where she was, between Justin and his sons, like a wall made of courage. "Mr. Walsh," she said softly, "they needed to do this." Needed? Justin's voice cracked, raw and jagged. They needed to destroy my house? To ruin the one thing I've worked to keep together? His hands were shaking, his chest was heaving. He couldn't tell if he was furious or falling apart. Spencer started crying, those small, choking sobs that come from a child who knows he's done something terribly wrong. Spencer's voice trembled. "We just wanted to draw, Mummy." That word, Mummy, it hit Justin like a fist to the stomach. He turned to the wall, really looked at it for the first time, and felt the air leave his lungs. There she was. Rebecca, drawn in stick figures and crooked lines, a woman with long hair holding 2 small hands. Another drawing showed her with angel wings, smiling down at 2 little boys. And beneath it, in Owen's careful handwriting, "Mummy loves us from heaven." Another drawing showed a kitchen, a woman at the stove, 2 kids beside her, smoke rising in blue swirls. And underneath, in Spencer's messy scrawl, "Mom's Sunday pancakes." Justin stared at that drawing and suddenly he was back there, standing in the kitchen on a Sunday morning. Rebecca laughing as she flipped another burned pancake and called it the lucky one. The boys giggling, the smell of butter and warmth and a life that felt whole. He could almost hear her voice. "They need to see that mistakes are just part of making something beautiful, Justin. Don't ever let them forget that." His throat closed, his vision blurred. For one terrible, beautiful second, he wasn't a billionaire standing in a ruined living room. He was just a man who missed his wife so much it felt like dying every single day. But then the anger came roaring back because anger was safer than grief. Anger didn't break you. Anger kept you standing. "You had no right," Justin said, his voice low and cold now. "You don't get to make decisions about my sons. You don't get to let them remember her?" Brenda's voice was quiet, but it cut through everything. To let them talk about her, to let them feel something other than fear. "They're not afraid." "Yes, they are." Brenda's eyes were steady, unflinching. "They're terrified. They're scared that if they mention her name, you'll disappear too. So they've learned to be silent, to be perfect, to pretend she never existed." "That's not," Justin's voice broke. "That's not what I—" "Then what are you doing?" Brenda asked, and her voice wasn't angry, it was sad, heartbroken. "Because from where I'm standing, you've turned this house into a grave, and your boys are suffocating in it." The words landed like stones. Justin opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Owen stepped forward, so small, so fragile. He pressed his paint-covered hand against Justin's leg and whispered, "We miss her every day, Daddy." His voice was barely audible. "But when we draw her, it feels like she's still here, like she's still watching." Justin looked down at his son, at the tiny handprint now staining his expensive suit, at the tears streaming down Owen's face, and he felt something inside him crack so deep he thought it might never heal. Brenda knelt beside the boys. She gently wiped a streak of blue from Spencer's cheek. "Why don't you show Daddy the other one?" she said softly. Spencer pointed to a messy swirl of colors on the wall. "That's when Mommy let us draw on her arms. She said we made her a superhero." Justin's breath caught. He remembered that day, coming home from work, walking into the living room and finding Rebecca's arms covered in stars and stick figures. She'd laughed and said, "They made me invincible." That was 2 weeks before the diagnosis. The memory hit him like a tidal wave, and suddenly he couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't hold it together anymore. "You think this helps?" he said, his voice breaking into pieces. "You think remembering makes it hurt less?" Brenda looked at him with eyes full of compassion and something else. "Truth." "No," she said quietly. "I think remembering is the only way you stop running from the pain. And maybe, just maybe, the only way you start living again." The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was raw, open, bleeding. Justin stared at the wall, at his sons, at the maid who dared to break every rule he'd built to keep himself from falling apart. And for the first time since Rebecca died, he didn't know what to do. He wanted to yell, to cover the walls, to restore order and control and all the things that kept him functioning. But Owen was still touching his leg. Spencer was still crying. And the drawings, God, the drawings were everywhere. His wife, his boys, their memories, everything he'd tried so hard to bury. Brenda stood slowly, waiting for his verdict. He could see the fear in her eyes now, the fear that she'd pushed too far, that she'd lose her job, that she'd made everything worse. The boys waited too, small bodies tense, eyes full of hope and terror. Justin opened his mouth, but the only word that came out was, "Why?" It was barely a whisper. Brenda's eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed steady. "Because they asked me if it was okay to love her, and I couldn't." Her voice cracked. "I couldn't let them think the answer was no." Something inside Justin shattered completely. He turned away before they could see his face, before they could see the tears he'd held back for 18 months, finally breaking free. "Clean them up," he said, his voice hoarse and broken. "Just clean them up." And he walked out of the room. But as he left, he heard it. Laughter. Soft at first, then louder. Owen and Spencer, whispering to Brenda, showing her another drawing, their voices light and free in a way they hadn't been since the funeral. Justin stopped in the doorway, didn't turn around, just stood there, listening. And for the first time since Rebecca died, the sound didn't make him angry. It made him wonder if maybe, just maybe, he'd been wrong about everything. The walls were ruined. But maybe the walls were never the problem. Maybe the problem was the man who'd built them in the first place. And somewhere, in the quiet space between his heartbreak and his pride, Justin felt something he hadn't felt in months. The presence of something bigger than his pain, softer than his control, truer than his fear. A whisper that said, "You don't have to do this alone." But he wasn't ready to listen. Not yet. So he turned away from the laughter, walked upstairs, and locked himself in his office where the silence was familiar and the grief couldn't touch him. At least, that's what he told himself. But that night, when the house finally went quiet and everyone was asleep, Justin found himself standing outside the living room door, staring at the white sheets he'd ordered his staff to hang over the drawings, covering them, hiding them, erasing them, just like he'd been doing with his heart for 18 months. And as he stood there in the darkness, alone and hollow, one thought burned through him like fire. What if Brenda was right? What if the only way to stop the pain was to finally let himself feel it? But that question terrified him more than anything else. So he turned off the lights and walked away. Again, morning came too soon. Justin didn't sleep. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those drawings, Rebecca's face in crooked lines, the boy's handwriting spelling out her name like a prayer. He came downstairs at 6, earlier than usual, and found the living room exactly as he'd left it. White sheets draped over every wall like shrouds, the color hidden, the memories buried. It should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like suffocation. He made coffee in the kitchen black, no sugar, and tried to focus on his phone. Emails, stock reports, anything that didn't require him to think about yesterday. But then he heard footsteps. Small ones, soft and hesitant on the stairs. Owen appeared first, still in his pajamas, his hair sticking up in the back the way Rebecca used to smooth down every morning. Spencer followed close behind, quieter than usual, his eyes puffy from crying. They stopped when they saw Justin. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Owen whispered, "Good morning, Daddy." His voice was so careful, so small, like he was afraid the wrong word might break something. Justin's chest tightened. "Morning, buddy." Spencer climbed onto a chair at the kitchen table, but he didn't reach for the cereal box like he normally would. He just sat there, hands folded in his lap, staring at the wood grain. Owen sat beside him, same position, same silence. It wasn't the silence Justin had worked so hard to create. This was different, heavier, like the air itself was holding its breath. Justin poured 2 glasses of orange juice and set them on the table. "You guys hungry?" Owen shook his head. Spencer didn't respond at all. Justin sat down across from them, trying to find words that didn't exist. "Listen, about yesterday. We're sorry," Owen blurted out, his voice cracking. "We won't do it again. We promise." Spencer nodded quickly, tears already forming. "We'll be good. We'll follow the rules." And there it was. The thing that broke Justin more than the drawings ever could. His sons apologizing for loving their mother. "You didn't do anything wrong," Justin said, but his voice came out hollow, mechanical, like he was reading from a script he didn't believe. Owen looked up, confused. "But you were mad." "I was." Justin stopped. What was he? Angry? Scared? Drowning in grief he didn't know how to name? "I was surprised. That's all." "Are you going to fire Miss Brenda?" Spencer asked, his voice barely a whisper. Justin's stomach dropped. He'd forgotten they didn't know yet, that Brenda had already packed her things, that she was gone. She's not coming back," Justin said carefully. The words landed like a blow. Owen's face went pale. Spencer's chin started trembling. "Why?" Owen asked, his voice rising. "We said we're sorry. We'll be good, Daddy, we promise." "It's not about being good," Justin said quickly, but he didn't know how to explain it. How could he tell them the truth? That he'd fired her because she made him feel things he'd spent 18 months trying to kill? That she'd cracked open a door he needed to stay closed? Then why? Spencer's voice broke completely. Why'd you make her leave? Justin opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Because the truth was too ugly to say out loud. I made her leave because she reminded me that I'm failing you, that I've been so busy protecting myself, I forgot to protect you. But he couldn't say that. So instead, he said, the only thing he could think of. Sometimes adults make decisions that don't make sense to kids, but it's for the best. You'll understand when you're older. It was the worst answer he could have given. Owen's face shut down completely, that blank, distant look that meant he'd stopped trying to understand. Spencer just stared at his juice glass, tears sliding silently down his cheeks. And Justin sat there, watching his sons disappear into themselves, knowing he'd done this. He'd built a house so quiet, his children had forgotten how to speak. Footsteps sounded from the kitchen entrance. The new housekeeper, Mrs. Pemberton, an efficient woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a tight bun, stepped into view. "Good morning, Mr. Walsh," she said crisply. "Boys, finish your breakfast. We have a schedule to keep." Owen and Spencer didn't move. Mrs. Pemberton frowned. "Did you hear me?" "They're not hungry," Justin said quietly. "Nonsense. Children need structure. They'll eat when they realize breakfast time doesn't last forever." She turned toward the boys with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Come now. Up you go." Spencer slid off his chair silently and started toward the stairs. Owen followed without a word. Mrs. Pemberton nodded, satisfied. They'll adjust. Children always do. But as Justin watched his sons disappear up the stairs, small, silent, obedient, he felt something cold settle in his chest. They weren't adjusting. They were vanishing. And he had no idea how to bring them back. Later that morning, Justin stood outside the living room, staring at those white sheets again. Somewhere underneath, Rebecca smiled in stick figure form. Somewhere underneath, his boys had written her name in colors that felt like hope. And Justin realized something that made his hands shake. He didn't cover those walls to protect his sons from pain. He covered them to protect himself. But protection, he was learning, looked a lot like prison. And the worst part? He'd locked his children inside it with him. 3 days passed. 3 days of silence so thick it felt like drowning. Owen and Spencer stopped talking, not just to Justin, to everyone. They moved through the house like ghosts, pale and weightless, their footsteps barely making a sound. They didn't play, didn't laugh, didn't fight the way brothers do. They just existed. Mrs. Pemberton called it good behavior. She praised them for being well-mannered and obedient. But Justin knew better. This wasn't good behavior. This was surrender. On the third morning, Justin found them sitting in front of the living room wall again. Not playing, not drawing. Just sitting side by side on the floor, staring at the white sheets like they were waiting for something to appear. "Boys," Justin said softly, "what are you doing?" Neither of them answered. He stepped closer, his chest tightening. "Owen? Spencer?" Owen finally turned his head, his eyes hollow and distant. "We're just sitting, Daddy." "Why here?" Spencer's voice came out flat, emotionless. "Because this is where she was." Justin's breath caught. Where she was. Not the drawings, not the memory. Her. As if by sitting there, they could somehow bring her back. Justin knelt beside them, trying to find words that wouldn't break what was already shattered. "Your mom's not in the walls, buddy. She's—" "We know," Owen interrupted quietly. "Miss Brenda told us. She's in heaven." "Then why are you sitting here?" Owen looked at him with eyes too old for a 6-year-old. "Because you won't let us talk about her anywhere else." The words cut deeper than any anger could. Justin reached out, but Owen pulled away slightly, not dramatically, just enough to make it clear he didn't want to be touched. It was the smallest movement, but it shattered Justin completely. "I'm not trying to—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I'm not trying to keep you from remembering her." "Then why did you cover the walls?" Spencer asked, his voice breaking. "Why did you make Miss Brenda go away?" Justin didn't have an answer. Or maybe he did, he just couldn't say it out loud. "Because remembering her means feeling the fact that she's gone, and I can't survive that pain again." But his sons were 6 years old. They didn't understand survival tactics. They only understood that their father had erased the one thing that made them feel close to their mother. Mrs. Pemberton appeared in the doorway, her voice sharp. "Boys, come along. We have lessons." Owen stood slowly, mechanically. Spencer followed. They walked past Justin without looking at him. And for the first time since Rebecca's funeral, Justin felt completely, utterly alone. That afternoon, Justin tried to work, tried to focus on emails and conference calls and quarterly reports, but his mind kept drifting back to the boys, to their silence, to the way Owen had pulled away from his touch. At 4 o'clock, his phone rang. Dr. Sarah Chen, the family therapist Rebecca had found before she died. "Mr. Walsh," Dr. Chen's voice was calm but concerned. "I got your message about the boy's behavior. Can you describe what you're seeing?" Justin leaned back in his chair, exhaustion weighing on every word. "They've stopped talking, stopped eating properly. They just sit there." "How long has this been going on?" 3 days. A pause. "What happened 3 days ago?" Justin's jaw tightened. "I had to let our housekeeper go." "The one the boys were close to?" "Yes." Another pause, longer this time. "Mr. Walsh, I need you to listen very carefully. What you're describing is traumatic regression. Your sons are shutting down emotionally because they feel unsafe expressing their feelings." "They're safe," Justin said quickly. "They have everything they need." "They don't have permission to grieve, Doctor." Chen interrupted gently. "Children need to know it's okay to miss someone, to talk about them, to cry, if they think their emotions will cause the adults around them to disappear." "I'm not disappearing." "But someone did, someone they trusted, someone who let them feel what they needed to feel." Her voice softened. "Mr. Walsh, your sons are 6 years old. They've already lost their mother, and now, from their perspective, they've lost another person who made them feel safe. Can you understand how terrifying that is?" Justin closed his eyes, his throat burning. "What do I do?" "You give them what they need most. Permission. Permission to remember, permission to hurt, permission to love someone who isn't here anymore." She paused. "And you stop hiding from your own grief, because children don't just hear what we say, they feel what we refuse to face." The call ended. Justin sat in his office, staring at the walls, clean, white, empty, just like him. He thought about Owen pulling away from his touch, about Spencer's hollow voice, about 2 little boys sitting in front of a covered wall, waiting for their mother to reappear. And he realized something that made his hands shake. He'd spent 18 months trying to protect them from pain, but all he'd done was teach them that love was dangerous. That memory was forbidden. That grief was something to hide. Somewhere in the house, his sons sat in silence. And Justin finally understood. The walls weren't the problem. He was. But understanding it and knowing how to fix it were 2 very different things. So he did what he'd been doing for 18 months. He pushed the feelings down, buried them deep, and told himself that structure and time would make everything okay. Even though, deep down, he knew it was a lie. Day 4 came quietly. Too quietly. Justin woke before dawn, the kind of restless waking that comes when your body knows sleep won't bring peace anyway. He lay in the darkness of his bedroom, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Dr. Chen's words. "Children don't just hear what we say, they feel what we refuse to face." He thought about Rebecca, how she used to wake him on mornings like this, her hand gentle on his shoulder, her voice soft. "You're thinking too loud again, Justin. Come back to me." But there was no coming back now. She was gone, and he was drowning in the silence he'd created. Breakfast was worse than the day before. Owen and Spencer came downstairs like sleepwalkers, their movements slow and careful, as if the air itself might break if they moved too fast. Justin had made pancakes, Rebecca's recipe, the one she'd scribbled on a card and taped inside the cabinet. He'd found it last night while searching for coffee filters, and something in him cracked when he saw her handwriting. "Don't forget the vanilla, J. That's the secret." He'd followed the recipe exactly, measured every ingredient, even burned the first one, the way she always did, and set it aside with a shaky smile nobody was there to see. When the boys walked into the kitchen and saw the stack of pancakes on the table, they stopped. Owen's eyes widened. Spencer's lips parted slightly. "I made breakfast," Justin said, his voice rougher than he intended. "Your mum's recipe." The boys didn't move. "It's okay," Justin added quickly. "You can sit." They climbed into their chairs slowly, their eyes locked on the pancakes like they were seeing a ghost. Justin slid plates in front of them, cut the pancakes into smaller pieces the way Rebecca used to, poured syrup in little pools on the side. "Go ahead," he said softly. Owen picked up his fork, stared at it, set it back down. Spencer didn't even try. "It's Mum's pancakes," Justin said, his voice cracking slightly. I thought you'd like them." Owen looked up at him with eyes that held too much for a 6-year-old to carry. "They're not Mum's," he whispered. "Mum's not here." The words hung in the air like smoke. Justin's throat closed. "I know. I just thought—" "You thought food would make us forget." Owen's voice was still quiet, but there was something underneath it now. Something sharp, something breaking. "No," Justin said quickly. "I thought it would help you remember." "But you won't let us remember," Spencer said, his voice barely audible. "You covered her up." Justin felt something crack wide open in his chest. "That's not what I—" He stopped, took a breath, tried again. "I was trying to protect you." "From what?" Owen asked. "From the pain, from the grief, from the fact that she's gone and never coming back, and I don't know how to live in a world without her." But he couldn't say that. So instead, he said nothing. The silence stretched long and awful and suffocating. Finally, Owen pushed his plate away. "I'm not hungry." Spencer did the same. They slid off their chairs and started toward the door. "Boys, wait." But they didn't wait. They just walked away, leaving Justin alone in the kitchen with pancakes going cold and the ghost of his wife's handwriting still taped inside the cabinet. Later that morning, Justin found himself standing outside their bedroom door. He could hear them inside, soft whispers, movement, the creak of floorboards. He raised his hand to knock, hesitated, lowered it again. What would he even say? "I'm sorry I can't be the father you need right now. I'm sorry your mother's death broke something in me I don't know how to fix. I'm sorry I'm so scared of feeling the pain that I've forgotten how to feel anything at all." He stood there for a long time, his forehead pressed against the door, listening to his sons exist on the other side of a barrier he'd built with his own hands. Finally, he walked away, went to his office, closed the door, sat at his desk, and stared at nothing. The house was quiet. But it wasn't the peaceful quiet he'd been chasing. It was the quiet of a tomb. And somewhere in that silence, Justin felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in 18 months. Doubt. What if he'd been wrong about everything? What if silence wasn't healing, it was just hiding? What if control wasn't strength, it was just fear wearing a mask? What if the walls he'd built to protect his sons were actually the walls that were killing them? He opened the bottom drawer of his desk, pulled out Rebecca's journal. The leather was soft and worn under his fingers. He opened it to a random page. Rebecca's handwriting stared back at him. "Jay, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And I know you. I know you're trying to be strong, trying to hold everything together, trying to make sure the boys don't fall apart. But baby, listen to me. You can't hold grief together. It doesn't work that way. Let them cry. Let them scream. Let them draw on the walls and talk about me until their voices go hoarse. Because the only way through this kind of pain is straight through the middle of it. Don't make them walk this road alone. And please, for the love of God, don't walk it alone yourself. You're stronger than you think. But you're not strong enough to carry this by yourself. Let people help you. Let the boys help you. Let grief break you open, because that's the only way the light gets back in." Justin's hands shook. Tears blurred the words. And for the first time since she died, he let himself cry, really cry, the kind of sobbing that comes from somewhere so deep it feels like it might never stop. He cried for Rebecca, for the boys, for the man he used to be before grief turned him into stone. And when the tears finally slowed, he sat there in the wreckage of his control, staring at his wife's words, and whispered the truth he'd been running from. "I don't know how to do this without you." The office was silent, but this time the silence didn't feel like protection. It felt like surrender. And maybe, Just maybe, that was exactly what he needed. Day 5 began with a sound that stopped Justin's heart. A thud. Soft but heavy. The kind of sound that doesn't belong in a quiet morning. Then silence. Then Spencer's voice, high and terrified. "Owen! Owen, wake up!" Justin was out of his office and up the stairs before his mind caught up with his body. His heart slammed against his ribs as he burst through the boy's bedroom door. Owen was on the floor. Pale, eyes half closed, his small body crumpled like a puppet with cut strings. Spencer was kneeling beside him, shaking his brother's shoulder, tears streaming down his face. "Owen, please, please, wake up." Justin dropped to his knees, his hands trembling as he touched Owen's forehead. Cold. Too cold. "Owen," his voice cracked. "Buddy, can you hear me?" Owen's eyelids fluttered. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Justin's training kicked in the first aid course Rebecca had made him take years ago. He checked Owen's pulse. Weak, but there. Breathing. Shallow. "Spencer, go downstairs. Tell Mrs. Pemberton to call 911. Now." Spencer didn't move, frozen in terror. "Spencer!" Justin's voice was sharp, desperate. "Go." Spencer ran. Justin gathered Owen into his arms, feeling how light his son had become. Too light. When had that happened? When had Owen gotten so small? "Stay with me," Justin whispered, his voice breaking. "Please, buddy, stay with me." Owen's eyes opened slightly, focused on Justin's face, and in a voice so weak it was barely a breath, he whispered, "I'm sorry, Daddy. I'll be good, I promise." The words shattered Justin completely. "You didn't do anything wrong," he choked out. "You're perfect. You're so perfect." But Owen's eyes were already closing again. The ambulance came within 8 minutes. It felt like 8 hours. The paramedics worked quickly, professionally. IV fluids, oxygen, questions. Justin could barely answer through the fog of panic. How long has he been like this? Has he been eating? Any recent trauma or stress? Trauma, stress. Justin thought about the covered walls, the silence, the way Owen had pulled away from his touch. He stopped eating, Justin heard himself say. A few days ago, he's been quiet. The paramedic glanced at her partner. Something passed between them, understanding, concern. "We need to transport him," she said gently. "Children's Hospital. You can ride with us." Spencer appeared in the doorway, Mrs. Pemberton behind him, her usual composure cracked. "I'm coming too," Spencer said, his voice trembling but firm. Justin nodded, unable to speak. The emergency room was a blur of fluorescent lights and antiseptic smell, and doctors speaking in calm, measured tones that did nothing to calm the storm in Justin's chest. They took Owen back immediately. Tests, assessments, words like dehydration and malnutrition and severe stress response. Justin sat in a plastic chair, Spencer pressed against his side, and tried to understand how he'd let it get this far. A doctor approached, young, kind-faced, her eyes gentle. "Mr. Walsh, I'm Dr. Patel. Owen's stable now. We've got him on fluids, and he's responding well." Justin's breath came out in a rush. "Thank God. But we need to talk." Dr. Patel pulled up a chair, sat at eye level. Owen's collapse wasn't just physical. It's a manifestation of extreme psychological distress. His body essentially shut down because his nervous system couldn't handle the stress anymore. Justin's stomach dropped. "I don't understand." Children process trauma differently than adults. When they can't express their emotions verbally, their bodies express it for them. She paused. "Has there been any recent loss or change in Owen's life?" "His mother," Justin said, his voice hollow. "She died 18 months ago." Dr. Patel nodded slowly. "And recently?" Justin swallowed hard. "I fired our housekeeper. The boys were close to her." Understanding dawned in the doctor's eyes. "Mr. Walsh, I need you to hear this. Owen's not just grieving his mother anymore. He's grieving safety, stability, the ability to express love without fear of losing someone else." The words hit like stones. Spencer said something in triage that I think you need to hear. "Doctor." Patel's voice was gentle but firm. He said, "We thought if we were good enough, Daddy wouldn't make Brenda go away like Mommy did. Justin's world tilted. They think love is conditional, Dr. Patel continued. They think if they're perfect, if they're quiet, obedient, invisible, the people they love won't leave. That's not grief, Mr. Walsh. That's fear. And it's killing them. Justin looked down at Spencer, who was staring at the floor, tears dripping silently onto his sneakers. Is that true? Justin whispered. You think I made Mommy leave? Spencer's voice was so small. You made Miss Brenda leave, and you don't talk about Mommy anymore. So we thought if we were really, really good, you'd stay. The floor dropped out from under Justin. All this time, all these months of silence and control and rules, he thought he was protecting them. But what he'd actually done was teach them that love was dangerous, that people disappear when you're not perfect, that grief is something shameful. He pulled Spencer close, buried his face in his son's hair, and broke. I'm so sorry, he whispered. God, I'm so sorry. Spencer wrapped his small arms around Justin's neck and held on like he was drowning. And maybe he was. Maybe they all were. An hour later, they let Justin see Owen. He was awake, propped up on pillows, an IV in his small arm. His face was still pale, but his eyes were clearer. Justin sat beside the bed, took Owen's hand so tiny in his, and didn't let go. Hey, buddy, he said softly. Owen looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. Am I in trouble? Justin's throat closed. No, God, no, you're not in trouble. Then why are you crying? Justin hadn't realized he was. He wiped his eyes with his free hand, but the tears kept coming. Because I've been a terrible father, he whispered, and I almost lost you because of it. Owen's chin trembled. I don't want you to be sad, Daddy. I know, but sometimes being sad is okay. Sometimes it's the only honest thing we can be. Justin squeezed Owen's hand gently. Your mom used to tell me that. I should have listened. A long silence. Then Owen's small voice. Why do people we love keep leaving? The question broke something in Justin that had been barely holding together. I don't know, buddy. I wish I had a better answer, but I do know this. He leaned closer, made sure Owen could see his face. I'm not leaving, ever, no matter what. You understand? You don't have to be good for me to stay. You don't have to be quiet. You can be messy and loud and sad and angry, and I will still be right here. Owen's eyes filled with tears. Promise? I promise. Spencer climbed onto the bed, careful of the IV, and curled up on Owen's other side. And the three of them sat there in the hospital room, broken, exhausted, but together while the machines beeped softly and the world outside kept turning. Justin looked at his sons and realized something that changed everything. He'd spent 18 months trying to build a life without pain, but maybe pain wasn't the enemy. Maybe silence was. Maybe the only way to survive grief was to let it be loud. Owen was kept overnight for observation. The doctors wanted to monitor his vitals, make sure his body could handle food again without distress. Spencer refused to leave his brother's side, curling up in the hospital chair with a blanket a nurse had brought him. Justin sat between them, one hand on Owen's bed rail, the other resting on Spencer's shoulder, and tried to figure out how to rebuild what he'd broken. At some point after midnight, exhaustion pulled Spencer under. His breathing evened out, his small body finally relaxing into sleep. Owen was awake, though, staring at the ceiling with eyes that looked too old. Daddy? His voice was barely a whisper. Yeah, buddy? Can I tell you something? Justin's chest tightened. Anything. Owen was quiet for a long moment, like he was gathering courage. Miss Brenda, she wasn't just our housekeeper. Justin went still. What do you mean? She knew Mommy, before Mommy got sick. The words didn't make sense at first. Justin's tired brain struggled to piece them together. What? Miss Brenda showed us a picture of her and Mommy together. They were friends. Justin's heart stopped. Where is this picture? In her old room, in the drawer by the window. She said, Mommy asked her to take care of us. That Mommy picked her special. The hospital room suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing in. Why didn't she tell me? Justin's voice came out hoarse. Owen's eyes filled with tears. Because she said you wouldn't listen, that you'd send her away if you knew Mommy planned it. The truth, hit Justin like a freight train. Brenda hadn't overstepped. She'd been fulfilling a promise. Rebecca's promise. His wife had known that he'd try to lock the grief away, known that he'd need someone brave enough to break through his walls. And she'd sent someone who'd loved her too, someone who understood. "I have to go," Justin said suddenly, standing. Owen's hand shot out, grabbing Justin's wrist with surprising strength. "Don't leave." "I'm not leaving, I promise. Justin's voice cracked. "I need to see something. I'll be back before you wake up. I swear." Owen searched his father's face, looking for the lie, the abandonment he'd learned to expect. But Justin held his gaze steady. "I promise, Owen. I'm coming back." Finally, Owen let go. Justin drove home through empty streets, his mind racing. The house was dark when he arrived. Mrs. Pemberton had gone home hours ago. The silence was deafening. He climbed the stairs to the third floor to the room Brenda had occupied for 6 months. The room he'd barely entered, even when she worked there. He opened the drawer by the window. And there it was. A photograph in a simple wooden frame. Rebecca and Brenda, arms around each other, laughing at something outside the camera's view. They were at some kind of support group. He could see the folding chairs, the coffee station, the cancer awareness ribbons pinned to a bulletin board in the background. Rebecca looked thin, tired, but her smile was real. And beside her, Brenda looked at Rebecca with the kind of tenderness that only comes from Genjungda friendship. Justin's hands shook as he turned the frame over. Taped to the back was a note, Rebecca's handwriting, dated 3 weeks before she died. B. Thank you for everything, for listening, for understanding, for not treating me like I'm already gone. When I am gone, please watch over my boys. They're going to need someone who remembers me, as I really was messy, imperfect, full of love they won't know how to process. Jay will try to shut everyone out. He'll build walls and call it protection. He'll think silence means healing. Don't let him. The boys need permission to grieve, and Justin needs someone brave enough to show him it's okay to break. You're that someone. I know it in my bones. Please don't give up on them, even when it's hard, even when Justin pushes you away. And he will. Trust me. They need you, more than they'll ever be able to say. All my love. Becca. P.S. Tell the boys I'm proud of them. Every single day. Make sure they know. Justin sank onto Brenda's bed, the note trembling in his hands. Rebecca had known. She'd known exactly what would happen. And she'd sent help. But he'd been so blinded by his need for control, so terrified of feeling the grief, that he'd thrown that help away. He'd fired the one person Rebecca had trusted to hold them together. The realization crushed him. Brenda hadn't been manipulating his children. She'd been loving them the way Rebecca would have wanted. And he'd punished her for it. Justin pressed the note to his chest and let out a sound he didn't recognize, somewhere between a sob and a prayer. God, he whispered into the empty room, what have I done? The house gave no answer. Just silence. Always silence. But this time, the silence felt different. It felt like conviction, like truth breaking through concrete, like the moment right before everything changes. Justin looked at the photograph again, at Rebecca's face, at Brenda's gentle smile. And he knew what he had to do. He had to find Brenda. He had to apologize. Not the hollow, corporate apology he'd give a business partner. A real one, the kind that costs something, the kind that requires him to admit he was wrong about everything. He stood, tucked the photo and note into his jacket pocket, and headed for the door. But before he left, he stopped in the living room. The white sheets still hung over the walls. He walked to the largest one, gripped the edge, and pulled. The sheet fell away, and there she was, Rebecca, drawn in stick figures and crooked hearts and colors that looked like joy. Mommy loves us from heaven. Mom's Sunday pancakes. Mommy said, we made her a superhero. Justin stared at the wall, really stared at it, and saw what he should have seen from the beginning. This wasn't destruction. This was love. Messy, imperfect, beautiful love. The kind Rebecca had lived by. The kind he'd forgotten how to give. His phone buzzed. A text from the hospital nurse. "Owen's asking for you." Justin looked at the wall one more time. Then he turned and walked out the door. But this time, he wasn't running from the truth. He was finally ready to face it. And maybe, just maybe, that was where healing actually began. Justin drove back to the hospital as dawn crept over Boston. The city was just waking, soft light spilling over brick buildings, early commuters clutching coffee cups, the world moving forward the way it always does, indifferent to the private earthquakes happening in people's hearts. But Justin felt different. Lighter somehow, or maybe just less numb. The photograph was still in his jacket pocket, pressing against his chest like a heartbeat he'd forgotten he had. When he walked back into Owen's room, both boys were awake. Spencer had climbed into bed beside his brother, and they were whispering about something, their heads close together, their voices soft. They stopped when they saw Justin. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Justin pulled the chair closer and sat down, eye level with them. "I found the picture," he said quietly. Owen's eyes widened. Spencer sat up straighter. Justin pulled the photograph from his pocket and held it so they could see. Rebecca and Brenda, laughing together, frozen in a moment of friendship that death couldn't erase. "You were right," Justin said, his voice rough. "Miss Brenda and your mum were friends. Good friends." "Did you read the note?" Owen asked carefully. Justin nodded. "I did." "Are you mad?" "No." Justin's throat tightened. "I'm not mad. He struggled to find the word. "I'm ashamed." Spencer frowned. "Why?" "Because your mum trusted Miss Brenda to take care of you, and I fired her for doing exactly what your mum asked her to do." Justin looked at both of them, making sure they could see the truth in his eyes. "I was wrong. About the walls, about the rules, about all of it." Owen's lip trembled. "You were just sad, Daddy." "Yeah, I was sad, but being sad doesn't give me the right to make you sad too." Justin reached out, rested his hand on Owen's. "Your mum left that note because she knew I'd mess this up. She knew I'd try to control everything instead of just feeling it." "Feeling what?" Spencer asked. "How much I miss her." Justin's voice broke. "How scared I am of being your dad without her here to show me how. How much it hurts to walk through that house and see all the places she used to be." The boys were silent, watching him. "I thought if I kept everything clean and quiet, the pain would go away." Justin continued. "But all I did was teach you that loving her was wrong, that remembering her was dangerous, and that's the worst thing I could have done." Tears slipped down Owen's cheeks. "We thought you didn't want to remember her." "God, no." Justin pulled them both close, careful of Owen's before. "I think about her every single day, every single moment. I just didn't know how to talk about her without falling apart." "Maybe falling apart is okay," Spencer whispered into Justin's shoulder. Justin's breath hitched. "Yeah, maybe it is." They sat like that for a long time, three broken people holding each other together in a hospital room while machines beeped softly and the morning light grew stronger through the window. Finally, Owen pulled back slightly. "Daddy, can we ask Miss Brenda to come back?" Justin's heart squeezed. "I don't know if she'll want to. I said some really hurtful things to her." "But you could try," Spencer said, hope flickering in his eyes. "You could say sorry." Justin thought about Brenda's face when he'd fired her, the quiet dignity, the sadness, the way she'd hugged the boys and told them to keep drawing. "I can try," he said, "but it has to be a real apology, not just words. I have to mean it." "Do you mean it?" Owen asked. Justin looked at his sons, at their hopeful faces, their fragile trust, the courage it took for them to even ask. "Yeah," he said softly, "I mean it." Later that morning, after the doctors cleared Owen to go home, Justin stood in the hospital parking lot, staring at his phone. Brenda's number was still in his contacts. He'd never deleted it. His thumb hovered over her name. What would he even say? "I'm sorry I fired you for doing what my wife asked you to do. I'm sorry I was so terrified of feeling anything that I turned my sons into ghosts. I'm sorry I couldn't see that you were the answer to a prayer I didn't know Rebecca had prayed." He pressed call before he could talk himself out of it. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then her voice. "Hello?" She sounded cautious, guarded, like she'd been expecting this call but dreading it. "Brenda," Justin's voice came out rough. It's Justin Walsh. A pause. I know. I need to see you. To talk. Please. He swallowed hard. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking anyway. Another pause. Longer this time. Why now? Brenda asked quietly. Justin closed his eyes. Because Owen collapsed. Because I almost lost him. Because I finally understand what you were trying to tell me all along. He heard her sharp intake of breath. Is he okay? He's going to be. But Brenda, Justin's voice cracked. I found the picture, and Rebecca's note. I know everything now, and I need to apologize. Not over the phone. In person, please. The silence stretched so long Justin thought she might have hung up. Then, where? Justin gave her his address, even though she already knew it. When? She asked. Today, if you can. The boys. He stopped, steadied himself. The boys are asking for you. Another long pause. I'll be there at 2, Brenda said finally. But Mr. Walsh, I'm not coming back as your employee. If I come back at all, it's as family, the way Rebecca wanted. Do you understand? Justin's throat burned. Yes, I understand. Okay. Her voice softened slightly. I'll see you at 2. The line went dead. Justin stood in the parking lot, phone in hand, and felt something he hadn't felt in 18 months. Hope. Fragile, uncertain, terrifying, but real. He looked up at the sky, bright and clear and impossibly blue, and he whispered, I'm trying, Rebecca. I'm finally trying. Somewhere in the hospital behind him, his sons were waiting. Somewhere across the city, Brenda was deciding whether to trust him again. And somewhere beyond all of it, in whatever place souls go when bodies fail, Justin hoped Rebecca was watching. Hoping she could see that he was finally listening, finally learning, finally ready to let the walls come down. 2 o'clock came too slowly and too fast. Justin had brought the boys home from the hospital that morning. Owen was still weak, but the color had returned to his cheeks. Spencer hadn't left his brother's side, as if afraid that looking away might make Owen disappear again. They were in the living room now, the 3 of them staring at the wall where the drawings were still visible. Justin had pulled down all the sheets. Every single one. The colors had returned, and so had something else, something that felt like breathing after holding your breath for too long. Is Miss Brenda really coming? Spencer asked for the 5th time. She's really coming, Justin said, though his stomach churned with uncertainty. What if she refused to forgive him? What if the hurt he'd caused was too deep? What if... The doorbell rang. All 3 of them jumped. Justin stood, his legs unsteady. Stay here, okay? The boys nodded, watching him with eyes full of hope that terrified him. He walked to the front door, took a breath, opened it. Brenda stood on the doorstep, hands clasped in front of her, wearing jeans and a simple sweater. She looked tired, guarded, but she was here. Thank you for coming, Justin said, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded but didn't smile. How's Owen? Better, stronger. Thanks to you. He stopped himself. Can we talk, please? Brenda glanced past him toward the living room, where she could probably hear the boys whispering. Her expression softened slightly, but when she looked back at Justin, the wall was still there. Okay. Justin led her to the study neutral ground and closed the door gently behind them. They stood facing each other, the silence heavy between them. Justin had rehearsed this moment 100 times in his head, had planned exactly what to say, how to say it. But now that she was here, all those words felt hollow. So he did the only thing he could do. He told her the truth. I was wrong, he said, his voice rough. About everything. About the walls. About firing you. About thinking I could control grief the way I control a business deal. Brenda's expression didn't change, but she was listening. Owen showed me the picture, the one of you and Rebecca. Justin pulled it from his pocket, held it between them like evidence. And I read her note. Brenda's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. Rebecca trusted you, Justin continued, his voice breaking. She knew exactly what would happen after she died. She knew I'd shut down. She knew I'd try to erase her. And she sent you to stop me. He swallowed hard. And I fired you for it. Yes, Brenda said quietly. You did. Justin flinched at the simplicity of it. No anger, just fact. I don't deserve your forgiveness, he said. I know that. But I'm not asking for me. His voice cracked completely. I'm asking for Owen and Spencer. They need you, Brenda, not as hired help, as family, the way Rebecca wanted. Brenda wiped her eyes, but her voice stayed steady. And what do you need, Mr. Walsh? The question caught him off guard. Justin faltered. I need to learn how to be their father again. The father Rebecca believed I could be. The one I was before grief made me cruel. That's not what I asked. Brenda took a step closer, her eyes searching his face. I asked what you need, not what the boys need, not what Rebecca wanted. You. Justin's throat closed. No one had asked him that. Not since Rebecca died. Not once. What did he need? The answer came from somewhere deep and true, a place he'd locked away for 18 months. I need to stop being so afraid, he whispered. Afraid of the pain, afraid of remembering, afraid that if I let myself feel how much I miss her, I'll never stop breaking. Brenda's expression finally softened. And are you? Afraid? Terrified, Justin admitted. But I'm more afraid of losing my sons than I am of facing the grief, and I almost did lose them, because of my cowardice. Brenda was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Rebecca told me something before she died. She said, Justin's going to think strength means not crying, but real strength is crying and getting back up anyway. She paused. Are you ready to get back up, Mr. Walsh? Justin looked at her, really looked at her, and saw what Rebecca must have seen. Courage, compassion, the kind of love that doesn't quit, even when it would be easier to walk away. I'm ready to try, he said, but I can't do it alone. The boys can't do it alone. His voice dropped to almost nothing. Will you help us, please? Brenda closed her eyes, and for a terrible moment, Justin thought she'd say no. Then she opened them, and there was something different there. Not forgiveness, not yet, but possibility. I have conditions, she said. Anything. The walls stay, every drawing, every memory. No more covering things up. Done. You start real therapy. Not the kind where you sit in silence, the kind where you actually talk. Justin nodded. Okay. And this, she gestured between them. This isn't employer and employee anymore. If I come back, I'm coming back as family. I eat meals with you. I speak my mind. I tell you when you're wrong. Her voice strengthened, because that's what Rebecca asked me to do, and I won't dishonor her memory by being anything less. Justin felt something break open in his chest, not pain this time, but relief. Family, he repeated. Yes, please. Brenda searched his face one more time, looking for the lie, the manipulation, the control. She didn't find it, because for the first time in 18 months, Justin Walsh was telling the complete truth. Finally, she nodded. Okay, I'll come back. Justin's legs almost gave out. Thank you, God, thank you. But Justin, she used his first name for the first time ever. If you ever make those boys feel like their love is conditional again, if you ever make them think they have to be perfect to be worthy, I'm gone, and I won't come back. Do you understand? I understand. Good. Brenda moved toward the door, then paused. Can I see them? Justin's throat was too tight to speak. He just nodded and opened the door. The moment the boys heard footsteps, they were off the couch. Miss Brenda, Spencer's voice cracked with joy. Owen moved slower, still weak, but his face lit up in a way Justin hadn't seen in days. Brenda knelt as they crashed into her, wrapping them both in her arms. Hi, sweet boys. I missed you so much. You came back, Owen whispered into her shoulder. I came back, she said firmly, and I'm staying, if you'll have me. Spencer pulled back, eyes wide. Really? You're staying? Brenda looked at Justin over their heads. He nodded. Really, she said. The boys erupted into laughter, real, unguarded, joyful laughter, and tackled her in another hug. Justin stood in the doorway, watching his sons come back to life, and felt tears stream down his face. But this time, he didn't hide them. This time, he let them fall. Because maybe, just maybe, Rebecca had been right all along. Real strength wasn't holding everything together. It was letting yourself break open so the light could finally get back in. 2 weeks later, the house felt different. Not perfect, not silent, but alive. Justin stood in the kitchen doorway, watching Brenda teach the boys how to make Rebecca's pancakes. Owen stood on a step stool, carefully measuring flour. Spencer was cracking eggs, getting more shell in the bowl than yolk, but laughing about it. Brenda didn't correct him. She just fished out the shells and said, "Your mum used to do the same thing," called it adding texture. The boys giggled, and Justin felt his chest tighten, not with pain this time, but with something warmer. Gratitude, maybe, or grace. "Daddy," Spencer called. "Come help." Justin crossed the kitchen, rolled up his sleeves, and joined them. It was messy, chaotic. Flour dusted the counters, batter dripped on the floor, and nobody cared. This was what Rebecca had wanted all along. Not perfection, just presence. That afternoon, they gathered in the living room. The wall was still covered in drawings. Owen and Spencer had added more over the past 2 weeks. New memories, new colors, new moments they wanted to preserve. But today was different. Today, they were adding something together. Brenda handed Justin a blue marker. "Your turn." Justin stared at the wall, his hand trembling slightly. He hadn't drawn anything since grade school. But that wasn't what made him nervous. It was the permanence of it, the declaration. Owen tugged on his sleeve. "It's okay, Daddy. It doesn't have to be perfect." Justin looked down at his son, this brave, beautiful boy who'd almost slipped away because Justin had been too afraid to let him be human. "Okay," Justin said softly. "What should I draw?" Spencer pointed to a spot near Rebecca's stick figure. "Draw yourself, next to Mommy." Justin knelt, uncapped the marker, and drew a simple figure beside Rebecca, tall, a bit crooked, holding her hand. Underneath, in careful letters, he wrote, "Daddy's learning to remember out loud." Owen added his own drawing beside it, the 4 of them together. Rebecca with angel wings, Justin with his briefcase, and 2 small boys holding everyone's hands. Then Spencer drew Brenda in green marker, standing beside them all. Not replacing anyone, just connected, part of the story. He labeled her with a heart, Miss Brenda Family. Brenda's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, boys." "You are family," Owen said simply. "Mommy said so." Justin stood, looking at the wall, this beautiful, messy, honest mural of grief and love and healing. It wasn't what he'd planned, but it was real. And real, he was learning, was so much better than perfect. That evening, after the boys were in bed, Justin found himself standing in the living room again. Brenda joined him, 2 cups of tea in her hands. She offered him one. "Thank you," he said, "for everything, for not giving up on us." Brenda smiled softly. "Rebecca wouldn't let me. She had very specific instructions." Justin laughed, a real laugh, the kind that came from somewhere deep. "That sounds like her." They stood in comfortable silence, looking at the wall. "You know what she told me the last time I saw her?" Brenda said quietly. Justin shook his head. She said, "Tell Justin it's okay to be scared, but don't let him forget how to love." Brenda's voice wavered. "I think she knew you'd try to protect yourself by shutting down, but she also believed you'd find your way back." Justin's throat tightened. "I almost didn't." "But you did." Brenda touched his arm gently. "That's what matters." Justin looked at the drawings again, at Rebecca's smiling face, at his son's handwriting, at the colors that had once terrified him and now felt like home. "I used to think remembering her would make the pain worse," he said. "But it's the opposite. Remembering her, it's like she's still here, in every story, every laugh, every messy pancake breakfast." "She is still here," Brenda said. "In Owen's kindness, in Spencer's courage, in the way you're learning to let yourself feel again." Justin nodded, unable to speak. Brenda squeezed his arm once, then headed toward the stairs. "Good night, Justin." "Brenda." She turned. "Rebecca chose well," he said, "when she chose you." Brenda's smile was soft and sad and beautiful. "She chose well when she chose you too. You just forgot for a while." After she left, Justin stayed in the living room, alone with the wall and his thoughts. He pulled out his phone and opened a new note, started typing. "Dear Rebecca, I'm sorry it took me so long. Sorry I tried to erase you. Sorry I taught our boys that loving you was something to hide. But I'm learning. We're all learning. Brenda came back. The walls are covered in color again. Owen and Spencer are laughing. And I'm... He paused, searching for the right word. I'm breathing again. I know you're watching. I feel it sometimes, in the quiet moments, in the way Spencer tilts his head just like you did, in Owen's gentle heart that he got from you. I promise I'll do better. I'll let them be messy. Let them remember you out loud. Let them know that love isn't something that disappears when you're not perfect. Thank you for sending Brenda. Thank you for knowing I'd need her even when I didn't know it myself. And thank you for teaching me even now, even from wherever you are, that the bravest thing we can do is keep loving, even when it hurts. I miss you every day. But I'm not running from it anymore. I'm letting the boys feel it. I'm letting myself feel it. And somehow, in the feeling, we're finding our way back to each other. I love you. Always. Jay. He saved the note, closed his phone, and looked at the wall one more time. The house was quiet now. But it wasn't the silence of a tomb. It was the peaceful quiet that comes after a storm when everything's been broken open and washed clean and you realize you're still standing. Still breathing. Still here. Justin walked to the wall and placed his hand on the drawing of Rebecca. "Good night, Becca," he whispered. And for the first time since she died, he felt something other than grief when he said her name. He felt gratitude for the years they'd had, for the boys she'd given him, for the wisdom she'd left behind, for Brenda, who'd been brave enough to honor a dying woman's wish even when it cost her everything. Justin turned off the lights and headed upstairs. In their room, Owen and Spencer were tangled together, breathing softly, their faces peaceful. He stood in the doorway, watching them sleep, and made a promise not to Rebecca this time, but to them. "I'll do better. I'll be present. I'll let you be human. I'll teach you that love isn't about perfection, it's about showing up, even when it's hard." He pulled their door closed gently and walked to his own room. But before he turned out the light, he did something he hadn't done in 18 months. He prayed. Not because he had all the answers, not because the pain was gone, but because he finally understood what Rebecca had been trying to tell him all along. You don't heal by forgetting. You heal by remembering out loud, in color, with messy drawings and burned pancakes, and people brave enough to love you even when you're falling apart. And maybe that's what grace is. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of love that refuses to let you face it alone. Justin turned out the light. And for the first time in 18 months, he fell asleep without fighting the dreams. Because in them, Rebecca was laughing, and the boys were drawing. And the walls, those beautiful, imperfect, colorful walls, were finally telling the truth. This wasn't a museum. This was a home, where grief and love lived side by side, where mistakes were forgiven, where memories were treasured, and where a family broken but healing, imperfect but trying, was learning to breathe again. Together,